Hello everyone, this is the second screencast for week 3, and we're doing what's going to be our last reading from Critchley, kind of key to what you're going to discuss in both essays, really, but especially in the last essay, which you'll be reading about after you submit the first essay. First essay is due Thursday night, then the last essay will come along and you can take a look at that. Don't get ahead of yourself. Get that first essay on ethnic comedy done first before you get tangled up in the second one. The second one has a wider choice of sources, by the way, but I'll get to that later. Anyway, let's see, make sure Critchley is not going to sue us for spelling his name wrong. There we go. And the joke's on all of us. Humor as sensus communis. A little more Latin, I'm sorry. Those Oxford professors just love to whip out the Latin to show their credentials, I guess. I think we'd be better off using Spanish since more of us speak it than Latin. Anyway, as you get the chapter going, as you get past it, and he talks about sensus communis, there's where the term appears, and he equates it as common sense. I'm going to say equates it. It's not the actual definition. It's close to the definition. Also, sociableness is part of it too. But anyway, think of common sense as the most common meaning for it. And sociableness is kind of common sense in a way that is meant to be people talking to each other and listening to each other, like in stand-up comedy, right? And he uses Shaftesbury, a famous writer about humor from the 18th century. And I'll save you the headache of trying to read 18th century work. If you read the Declaration of Independence, you know what I mean. This guy's writing is contemporary with Jefferson's writing in the Declaration of Independence. So it's not an easy read. It doesn't go like a hot knife through butter. This would be Anthony, Earl of Shaftesbury. It came with the birthright. He didn't earn it. But he earned it by his work on humor and comedy. Kind of, for modern times, one of the more influential thinkers on comedy. And he uses sensus communis. And let me take you to a few things he really emphasizes. How humor has a lot to do with argument through critical thinking, through logic. So, as you noticed in the chapter on ethnic humor, that sort of idea of cultural insiders and outsiders, people who would do the laughing at the joke or people who would do the laughing at the subjects of the joke. And by the way, if you notice this in this chapter, it's also a repeat of what you saw in the first chapter. It's a big part of his thesis for the book. And you'll run across it a little later if I get down to page 90. And it's a good place to go because he's kind of summing up the chapter. And there's actually that twofold claim part that I've highlighted. That's from chapter 1, the thesis of the book. And so a big part of the book is about cultural context, remember that term, of humor. And yes, how it makes fun of the way things are, makes jokes out of the way things are. If not saying it outright, at least implying that things could be better, they could improve, they could be changed. It's critique. So I'll take you there, but let me run us back up to the earlier part of the chapter. By the way, he tells jokes in every chapter. I hope you're not reading right past them. And raillery, that's something that really needs defining since it's no longer used in common speaking. It's archaic. It's used in the 17th and 18th centuries. In other words, the 16 and 1700s. It meant friendly teasing or good-natured joking. I guess the closest thing to our times would be calling it ribbing or busting someone's chops if you're from the East Coast, things like that. It's meant in a friendly way, but it's still joking. So keep an eye on this. You'll need it for the second set of reading questions. Let me move on to the assignments for the second part of the week and going into the fourth week. Let's pop into here. And you heard some of these mentioned in the Tuesday screencast. And of course, if you hit Wednesday, there's the second set of extra credit questions that deals with what you read in Weston about arguments about causes. But of course, this one's going to use a joke, and you're going to find those elements of causality, namely correlations, punchlines, conclusions, and so on. I'm going to skip something for a minute, the final paper. Now this comes due Thursday, so keep in mind that you've got a discussion posting to do Thursday. I've made it short on purpose because you'll be busy enough. And here it is for Thursday's discussion. You just have to take another Stephen Wright joke. I like his jokes because they work as short arguments really well. Of course, comedic arguments. A beautiful woman moved in next door, so I went over and returned a cup of sugar. You didn't borrow this. I will. So, just explain it in terms of a causal argument the way Weston did. And that'll get you finished for the moment because you won't have to jump into the discussions again until Saturday, and you'll have a posting to do for as response to the Saturday posting. But let me move on. Bigger stuff due. The analysis of ethnic humor. Now, do take time to read all the way through this one last time before you submit the essay. There are a lot of do's and don'ts here, and my best advice is to just head right through. And as I mentioned in the Tuesday screencast, if you can do this in a general way, you'll have an introduction. Cook it down to 2 paragraphs. Then you'll do all the explaining and all the supporting work in the later paragraphs, of course, as you get this thing going. Don't freak out about 5 to 7 pages. Believe me, you'll get there. Besides, you get to glue on a couple of, at least a decent sized paragraph at the end. Now let's do Thursday night. Once you've got that in, yes, do take a look at the final paper. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the early screencast next week. I think you'll have fun with it. You have a wide range of choices. And the second comic argument analysis, that will get assigned. It's going to show up on Friday, I think, due in a few days. But don't worry. When you see how you did on the first one, you can decide whether you want to bother doing the second one, because as I mentioned on the syllabus, I just take the best of the 2 scores, whichever one is higher. If you did like really well, 70 or above, you might just pass on it. You'll have enough to do in terms of classwork anyway. So stay in touch, keep those questions coming, and I hope you have a great wrap up for the week.